Ladies and gentlemen, can you believe it? But we have the Shamble Man against neblime in a ZVZ. And yes, I can group select stuff now. Isn't that nice? This is going to be a nice matchup on Otherworld. And I say nice ahead of time because this replay was called the best ZVZ to date. It is a couple of days old as of the recording of this video. This is if you're wondering when the backlog ends and the newer videos begin, this one is recorded just the previous night. So it is the 17th of August. You guys may know that I was initially planning a trip. Plans fell through for that, so we are probably still going to be seeing videos and productivity and all this other shit, but I'm also going to be enjoying the fact that I took the vacation off of work and maybe even a partial vacation off of CMBW. We'll see what exactly I want to do. But, you know me. Being productive, being a contributing member of Fraud Society, that's kind of my jam, isn't it? So there you go. Oh, and by the way, it doesn't seem like it's possible for me to group select. Oh, maybe it is. I can't group select neutral units, but I can group select other, like, actual players' units. Okay, I don't know if that's intentional, but this is worked by DF, so maybe he'll watch this replay and think, or this cast over, and he'll be like, oh, well, maybe I should fix that. But I think it's also... It might be fine. It would. I guess it would be ideal if they like sorted themselves into separate groups, but depending on player. But we don't have that particular technology, and yet the important deal is that I can select the number of workers here and see. Oh shit! You know, this guy has this many workers on his base or whatever, right? Like if we do this. Oh, well, technically that's the also one. I've been looking at this feature instead of actually paying attention to the game. So it's actually going to be a Quasrock opener to the Zorkis of Neblime. Now, I was talking with Kian, 3Crow, and it's body block. I was talking with 3Crow, and I was really surprised to find out that apparently Nathra cores were successfully dealing with Gorger cores. I really didn't expect that, so maybe we'll get a replay of that game at some point. But the Circuith is up, so I'm sure Neblime will be safe as his first Gorger core is out. But now the problem here is that as these Vorvs mass up, oh, they're actually going to go ahead and just charge in. It's deceptively durable, you know, like the Zethar cores have 2 armor pens, so they deal mostly full damage, and they do attack pretty frequently, but almost 300 HP, you know. What you really want to go after there is the workers. But Shambler's testing his limits, figuring out that he's probably not used Zethar cores in a very long time, if I had to guess. These are on move command, so they won't be killing off that worker, but he does spot it, and so maybe he'll be able to get a cheeky little surround or move some, you know, get a little bit of damage dealt, right? Kill the scout. I think he scouted with his Zeths, and because he's not microing, although he does manage to kill the worker, he's not microing back at home, so his worker advantage currently is actually totally not used. So now he'll get into it. And he does have a Spraith for the inevitable Gorg, which, funnily enough, I'm not sure Neblime was paying attention to when it burrowed. So let's see. We got another Gorg on the way. Another Droleth on the way, actually, to scout out. I think he was actually going to use that. That's really funny. Well, you know, pulling your workers away, maybe not the best move. A Larvosk next to the Quasrock and another Spraith. So having 2 Spraiths and having nothing else to defend, it seems a little bit spooky, but I don't think that Neblime will be able to make too much happen. You know, obviously Gorgs being melee, you can't actually attack anything in here without taking consistent damage from the Spraith, which is admittedly only going to be dealing 9 damage a pop, but still, you know, that's not the end of the world. Now, Hydrock Den will come around at the same time. If there's one thing I would say for Shambler's position, it feels like he could have more movement with the Zeths to see what else is going on. And maybe, like, burrow them in more interesting locations, or just, like, to scout the economy of his opponent. What other units is he making? Yeah, right now we can see he's only doing Gorger cores, so Neblime staying true to the game. And then we do see the worker count at about 16 here. So I like to check out like how many are harvesting gas, for example, right? And so we do have full saturation on the gas, which tells me that, you know, this could be going a couple of different ways. Now, Neblime's Gorg will have seen those Zeths, but I'm not sure if he was reacting to it on the minimap or not. And they are currently just sort of fanning around, scouting for any hidden bases, it looks like. Which is a little peculiar. Oh. He's not happy with that. There you go. This is sort of what I was thinking, right? Like, burrow around the extremities, get the perfect, you know, amount to completely see the ramp. Like, this one won't actually see if you hug this side, but pretty unlikely that you do that. So if you're going to be worrying about any ground attacks, then that's going to be a big deal. I still can't believe neblime is actually hunting down workers, the burrowed units using his workers. That's so amazing to me. Well, he's now behind in workers by quite a bit, so I guess this is the best ZVZ to date according to Shambler because he doesn't end up, you know, losing to Gorgs immediately. But there are a scary number of them massing up now, right? You know, you're talking about having 5 of them. Meanwhile, some Hydras are in production, and by some I mean a whole boatload. And also, I can't lie. When I saw the replay name and I clicked on it and I saw that it was playing on Otherworld, because when you're casting replays or opening up replays to watch, you can see the map name. I was like, oh, okay, the best CVZ today is on a map by me. And what my latest map. Oh, okay, all right, I see. So I took a little bit of pride in that. I won't lie. So we do actually have a Hydrock then coming up for Neblime. That's going to allow him to get some more opportunities for mixed attacks. There's a Lakizalisk already revealing its presence. So that will be, you know, additional confirmation of an expansion. Some workers being transferred at just the perfect time, but of course they do lard, so they're trying to pathfind there. So yeah, and now we also see a lot of workers were consumed in for more cells, you know, be they defensive or production. So as a result, Neblime is going to be a little bit ahead economically speaking. He doesn't have as many Larvosk Cesiants, but he is going to have a good number of, like, he's going to have equivalent hatchery, or larva production, I should say, because of the Hatteros that he's got there. This one's going to be anti-drop back here. Ovaleth to maybe transport that Lakizalisk is happening for Neblime at his natural. And it looks like Shambler is going to go for a base in the microsection. And Neblime is just going to confirm whether or not there are, in fact, bases being had. I think he might have spotted that on the minimap, so that might show up. Yeah, I think he's seeing that now. He's actually recalling all of his Gorgs. So this is at the same time the move-out is occurring with the Hydras. We'll see if Shambler pulls back. He does indeed pull back, and they're going to arrive a little bit async. So I think the Hydras are going to get here when there's only 3 Gorgs to engage in the battle. And so that might immediately zone him away. Indeed, it does. Again, there are, what, 5 out here right now, and then Neblime just went into a macro game behind it, which is not a bad move, admittedly. I will also mention, we talked a little bit about this in the latest episode of Prototype, which Veek7 had a guest appearance on, which is pretty funny. So it's basically an unofficial crow's nest, as something that was pointed out there by Mirian in the comments. And the Lakizalisk and Ovaleth combo are able to sort out the spying Zethicores, which is always funny. But we did talk a little bit about how, you know, there was a suggestion from Fagudo to have a revision to the macro where Droleths are 15-second build times and larvae are 15-second gestation times, and having that work out as a like a parity between the races. I was not really thinking in my head that this would be super necessary. It's mostly like something that he personally thinks is like a better for flow, and that's fine for him to have that opinion or what have you. But what I will say is there was then, like subsequently, and in an unrelated note, there were some games where Mystery Meat said that he thinks that if there's any decent macro on the Zerg, then Zerg are just OP, basically, relative to other races. And so I haven't asked for, you know, clarification or what he thinks about that more specifically. But the reduction in larva, like making larva a little bit more on the scarce side, certainly could help with that, right? So, meanwhile, speaking of reduction, we have a reduction in gas because, you know, that's 4 pairs of, is that 4? 5 pairs. 5 pairs of Naths, I don't know why I couldn't count there for a second, have just been hatched. There are no anti-air defenses whatsoever, and there hasn't really been aggressive scouting by Neblime, so this is going to catch him off guard, I think. Now, his Gorgs are, yeah, roving in the middle of the map. He does have some Iziracors out, which can do okay against the Naths. But he's not responding until they already descend upon him, right? So we're going to see a couple of worker kills here. Bold of him to go directly after the... yeah, he's just going to go after the next base now. You can see that the spread of damage is pretty significant here. But still, getting a decent number of worker kills. Now they're even in terms of workers. They kill the circuit just so that they can... he can just kill that. Yeah, he's a little bit overly cautious here. And the micro is absolutely festooning him with death. See you later, nerd. Oh, almost. One more hit would have done it. Well, back at home, anyway, some random workers are trying to jump off a cliff or something, but there's a net there. Ah, yes, the typing has activated. Dude, this is the best ZVZ to date. Of course it had to feature Shambler typing. Now, at this point, the Gorgs are not really very useful because they have not amassed up any higher. And meanwhile, there's just like a march of Iziracors against like all of the Hydras that have been massed up over the time. And a spinning guy. That's pretty good. Yeah, I don't know what's up with that, but that was... this is an interesting attack. Now, if the Lakizilisks joined the fight, that could have been really difficult for Shambler to deal with. Because even though he's got so many Hydras, he has no detection whatsoever. Like, if we just group select everything... he's got what would be 3 control groups of Hydras normally. 312, by the way. That's 36. Meanwhile, there's only 9 Izzies and 5 Gorgs, so this is going to be an interesting fight. Now, the Lakizilisks, again, will help with that, but if they just walk right past, it might not. Okay, a couple of Hydras go down. I didn't see any other units be put down. Oh, wow, that was an opportunity there where there was a bit of a shuffle. Gonna try to head in this way. The Lakizilisk only hitting the stuff on the right, and kiting backwards just so that they can pick off some of the Gorgs as well. Not a bad move there. He's going to try to duck forward here, but the Gorgs are still technically alive, although many of them are really low HP. So now that he's cleared that out, I think he should be able to stand right on top of that Lakizilisk. And there you go. You see it immediately get nuked down. He's going to do the same thing over here, the brute force method. Oh, one of his units does end up falling, so it's not going to be good enough. And the Iziracors are holding them at bay. More Lakizilisks are here. This one in the back not really able to affect too much change, but if they... Oh, it unburrows at the perfect time, but Shambler doesn't pick the right target. He actually attacks the circuit, so his Hydra is now down to just 8, 7 make that, so that's really rough for him to continue the fight, because back at home he's just got idle workers, right? He's got some Hydras, but they're not being rallied down, so... Unfortunately for neblime, his 3 more workers just die senselessly. One of the Lakizilisks is even going to get focused down here. And now it looks like the Hydras will be run out of the area. So all in all, you know, even workers, but again, neblime ahead because of the effective number of workers that are being mined, and there's no actual base here for it, right? He does jump into the... Yeah, that's really funny. He jumps into the anchor, which is actually going to help him, but unfortunately for him, you know, there's the Lakizilisk still there, and so this is going to continue to be pushed. So the neutral anchors, if you're not aware, in CMBW, you can just jump in those and start garrisoning them. You can't lift them off if they're neutral, but you can certainly use them to your advantage. And actually, that probably does help him quite a bit. But Iris going down, as well as a whole host of additional Hydras being made. So there you go, and another expansion on the way. So neblime, meanwhile, has been on 3 bases for a while, but even though his tier 2 is faster and his Gorgorl is just about to complete, I'm not sure that he has the gas income to sustain this. Like, he's got full saturation on all of his gases that he has. Now he's going to go for the Excision. This could be kind of awkward for timing, because when you mutate the Excision, it's taking time, right? That could give the Iris time to finish. Now this is ZVZ. No, this is Patrick. And also a sponsored sip. Unfortunately, I don't think we have anybody who donates on coffee whose name is Patrick, so I can't say that it was sponsored by Patrick, but if your name is Patrick, you can send us some money, and then I'll say that. So you can solve this problem. You too can stop forest fires. I'm looking forward to being able to like click on a unit that's in production, or a structure or whatever, and see how long it's going to take, right? Like, you can see the progress bar, but there's actually some stuff that we can do if we can finish some particularly annoying hooks. And that will allow us to draw the remaining seconds, like underneath this or whatever. It'll say like seconds remaining or something. I guess it would have to be above, because normally you have like production queues, but you don't see that for Zerg, obviously. Iziracor is trying to take the front here for Shambler. And indeed, they will hold the rest of them back. Yeah, Bactylisks going up the cliff, they are not as advantaged as they would be normally. But more and more of them are being made, so they can sort of whittle down this force. The real question is, you know, what other units are going to be prepared here? I do see Skithrakors on the way, as well as the Gorgor Swamp nearly being completed. Once he has Bactylisks of his own, he can be in a pretty good spot. And you can see here there's still some additional tickling happening. That Lakizilisk does try to get burrowed, but it's not going to happen. The other one is not going to be successful at burrowing for very long. I was going to say it won't be picked off, but then the Iziracor gave its life to scout for it, so we do see that. And yeah, there's not really that many units over here, right? There's a lot more Hydras, which have the mobility advantage and can close the distance. There was another Lekizalisk over here, but it was burrowed in a kind of an unrelated or not very useful place. So if that had been at the front already, maybe that would have helped. I think the Lekizalisk positioning really helped out quite a bit for Shambler, because it was the timing of trying to get them burrowed that made Neblime's forces less effective than they could have been. Mothrock Spire is on the way, and a whole host of Bactylisks have just been mutated. Now, technically, if this goes Muta, I mean, obviously both players have the response for that, which is Vithrilisks, right? You go Vithril Skith or something, and then you can deal with that pretty easily. So, yeah. I'm not really convinced that the Mothrock Spire can end the game, per se, but a Skither Core is going to come over here and start tickling workers. Obviously, there's like a whole host of Skiths that can be used to defend that. So even though he gets one kill, he will be killed soon after. Oh, will he get a second? Oh my god, he got a second kill! Alright, now Neblime has not paid attention to that. So he doesn't know that his opponent has a whole flock of Skiths. Now there are 3 Lekizalisks burrowed over here, as well as some Zoryus for even beefier frontline. And against Bactylisks that have no armor pen, that is definitely going to be pretty effective. Now he is going to try to use the bounce attacks, but obviously the Rilla Rokors will take some of those bounces, so when you're spawning Broodlings and stuff, at that point, like the Brood Spawn passive and whatnot, that's going to be pretty effective. But, you know, in this particular case, he's just happy, Neblime that is, to push the Shambler further away. Needs some more frontline for sure, though. Needs some more Iziricors and maybe some more, you know, Zoryus as well. Because you can see, just the fact that the Bactylisks have to contend with this means that the other Bactylisks can deal with it. It's kind of like a Zealot Drakodin, right? Like, if you have Zealots and your opponent just has Drakodins, your Drakodins, even in smaller number, can try to attack into them while they're busy dealing with the front line, right? This is really funny, by the way. So, at this point, the Skiths have left the building, and there is still no other tech structure here. No upgraded Quasrock, which I'm probably going to... Oh, I said that, and it started immediately. I'm probably going to be renaming that to the Quazeth. I think that'll be pretty good. I mean, it kind of skips over the Nath, but what are you going to do, right? I had the idea that it was going to be like the Nath... it was like Nath Quazeth or something like that, but it's just, it's like too many syllables. You know, it's not very catchy. So we'll probably go with that. I'll come up with some other catchy term for the... What do you call it? The... Instead of pool, it'll be some, like, unknowable term. Like, Rokor, Leth, etc. All those suffixes. We'll come up with something like that. Like, I guess in theory it could be Osk, or whatever. You know, that's production, but I would probably have to delineate between that and tech. Anyway, Naths are here, or, sorry, Skiths are here, not Naths. The second round of attempt. Now, and this is an interesting spot on the map where ground units can't easily siege it, you know? Like, technically you can try to, like, sit over here and benefit from cliff advantage with, like, phalanxes or something. But other than that, it's not really too easy to path down here with a ground army. So you really only have to worry about air defenses over here. And otherwise you're probably going to be, or, you know, drops as well. Otherwise you're going to be pretty okay. Meanwhile, some random Neblime Iziricors are going to get attacked by random Shambler Iziricors, and the entire army of Neblime is moving to that base, but I don't think they're going to be able to save it. Indeed, it is going to get absolutely slapped. And despite the less armor of the Skither Corps now at 1 armor instead of 2, they are a little bit too fast for the Bactylisks to catch up to. We have some idle Kagrants in here. I'm not sure what those are going to be. Maybe Larvosks? No, that's a Spraith, and that's a Spraith. Okay, so those are going to be Spear Tiths in the near future, I'm sure. Neblime is not very resourceful, bountiful in his current set of coffers. Meanwhile, Shambler, despite having less workers, up until very recently had like a load of, you know, extra minerals and stuff. Some more slap fighting occurring over here. It looks like some of the surviving Iziricors for Shambler were taken out. And some Skither Cores are slapped as well. One of them, Iziricors, is going to continue to stand watch over that. And yeah, some more units are being flocked over here. So the left side of the map is now being used, while Mutas are being amassed elsewhere. Now, Bactylisks will deal a lot of damage to Mutas, but unupgraded Spraiths, they are not going to do it, right? The Spear Tiths, maybe they could. You know, they're a little bit more durable in terms of the armor department. They've got twice as much armor. They have less HP, but they regress into the Spraith anyway, so it's not the end of the world. And, of course, they have the bounce attack. So that could help quite a bit versus the mutas, but I don't know if the sort of spider sense is going to be tingling for Shambler in the same way. Or if that's even where neblime is going to go. Is he going to go for the main with a massive attack? Now, his front line's already eliminated here, so he has to be really careful. He's going to try to use clip advantage on some of these backdills to see what he can do. But there's so many more backdills, right? We're dealing with like 20 backdills over here, 22 backdills for the Shambler. And that is going to be an overwhelming W for him. The mutas are showing their hand now and just killing off this Hatteras. They do actually force it down before the cancel can happen, and now the backdills have to race backward here before critical damage can be done. I mean, even just breaking down the tech or something would be significant. You saw that the leave roll almost died just to the bounces, so that would be one example of like being able to sort of force a remake. But you can't imagine you're going to be able to break down the eye roll in such a short amount of time, so... Yeah, unfortunately, he didn't really get any worker kills there or any like long-lasting damage. He just killed some Cesians. So he did deny this base, and it was even forced down without a cancel. But that's pretty much the main thing that he got, and he needed to be a little bit more cost-efficient than that, I think, if he wanted to basically trade more evenly, considering the big loss that he took earlier. Now, again, neblime is still ahead in bases, right? It must be said. He has taken the micro base in the main. He's taken the the low ground towards the left side of the map, and the more western base all the way in the bottom left. So that's something that Shambler is only on like 2.5 bases, if you want to call this a half a base. It's certainly not in terms of minerals, and it's already kind of depleted for him. Meanwhile, neblime is on more bases for sure. Although he's undersaturating his Excision here a little bit. So that's a case where he could definitely use an extra one. More mutas are still on the way. 15 of them, in fact. But now there's Spear Tiths in play, and some Bactylisks are nearby as well. So I wouldn't expect this to work out too well. You can see here getting slapped a bit. But they're going to see what they can do. Charging back in, focusing down some of the Spear Tiths. But there's just a few too many. Now, there is also a joint attack in the bottom of the map, so that's going to occupy some of these backlists that are trying to come in to defend this half a base. But I think the defenses themselves were too powerful and too fully upgraded. He went from 15, or 18, actually, I think, mutas, because some more joined in the middle of the fight, to 6. So he basically got his mutas divided by 3, and at the same time, Shambler is going for tier 3. So that is a point where it's like, clearly he's successfully... I think what's happened here is, even though neblime has more bases, he's investing a lot of that into military and then not really successfully cracking the Shambler, not really managing his army count, not really forcing him to spend so much money on military that he can't at all benefit from having access to this gas for so long. Now, he doesn't have any workers harvesting this from this ridge, but again, like, this guy had enough gas to get tier 3, and I think his tier 3 is going to be completed before neblime even orders his, right? Kind of similar to what we saw, like the inverse of what we saw before, where Shambler got tier 2 as the Gorgorl Swamp was almost done for neblime, but he just wasn't able to make the tech timing work out for him. We actually saw tech timing bite him in the ass versus Mystery Meat in a previous game, I think it was, but still pretty interesting to see how things worked out all in all. So this base is also going to get set up. We're going to see some more attempts at taking expansions here, and neblime is trying to play the economic game. But when you have a higher tier of thing, right? Shambler's considering his options right now, trying to figure out. He's down to 0 APM just to try to figure out what he wants to get at tier 3. What's he going to go for? Well, we're about to find out. But in the meantime, okay, he's going to go for Ultra Cores. The Zorkia's Shroud is a tier 1 structure, obviously, and it does take a little bit longer to build, but it will mutate into the Ultra Cavern when it is up, as well as an Xtoth Axis. We actually have not seen much use of the Xtoth Axis, so that's going to be neat to see. Gives access to the Excitralisk and the Mortothra Core. And I want to say, actually, pretty soon, we're going to be able to see the evolution of the... Oh, this is bold, okay. We're going to see the evolution of the Izcag Eteth, so that you'll be able to get access to tier 3 units from those. So Shambler's going to move out here, and I was saying this is bold because I was watching him upgrade all of his Hatterasks, all 3 of them, into Kaffirlasks, which means he'll not be able to build normal Droleths, but because he has tier 3, he will be able to build other things, right? He'll be able to build Gosvaleths, for example. We do have some hilarious decollision behavior, but they do eventually lard their way out of that. And neblime does have total dominion over this low ground area, and he also has pretty good scouting and intel over like what's going on with the other bases. He knows that Shambler is still locked in on just these bases here. So that being said, he's setting up the Excision. He's getting this area set up for anti-air defenses and such. He is just now building stuff over here, rallying more units, rallying more workers. He's got a lot of money. Did he get for tier 3? It's already mutating. Okay, good to know. He might go for a Vithrath Haunt. Meanwhile, the Ultra Cavern is coming up. And the Kaffirlosks are almost certainly going to be for Ultra Cores, right? We're going to be seeing those out quite a bit. So Excitralisks are also here. They're kind of interesting units because when they take fatal damage, they regress into a weaponless form of themselves. And after 8 seconds, I believe it is, they reconstitute into the form with the weapon. And so obviously when they're weaponless, they're not going to be picked up by auto acquisition unless there's nothing else here. So it's like a Zerg idea of the Vagrant, right? Instead of like permanently dying, they have that perpetual wind to them. So people may remember the Excitralisk as a name for a shared unit between the Protoss and Zerg way back when we had those. But I repurposed the name for a completely different kind of unit, which I suppose for the long-time players might end up seeming a little bit confusing, but that's okay. I'm sure most of you guys forgot about that anyway, right? Wink, wink. I'm sure most of you guys aren't donating on coffee yet. Actually, I never bothered checking YouTube stats to see like whether people subscribe to the channel more or like whether most people watch from YouTube Home or what. But anyway, if you're here, that's really all that matters, right? So hope you guys are enjoying the content. Zarkavra cores are out. So that's actually what he was going for. I thought he was going to go for Ultra cores. But he's gone for Zarkavra cores. Now these are some nasty-ass units, guys. 5 armor, 320 health, insane durability. And most of their damage doesn't come from their main attack, which is fairly similar to the Gorga core. It comes from their passive, which I think at this stage hasn't been given a micro cooldown associated with it. So it will every single attack that you get... Oh, fuck that Bactylus. Every single attack that you get will give you a small attack back, but they have to be in pretty close range to actually deal the damage. So it's like a minimum range or maximum range projectile. So this is a situation where, you know, it's going to be a little bit spooky. At the same time, Ultra Cores are on the way, but this, you know, force of Calculisks and Zarkavra Cores is going to be interesting. Where does this force go? Some mutas might spot it out, actually. Yep, looks like they will. And back at home, you know, we see that there's the Elthith Mound out, so that's going to be interesting. This might be the first time we see a Stratholeths in fucking like a year or something. Gaftalosks are out for Neblime. He's clearly going for the idea of, yeah, give me more units, right? And Zarkavra Core is going straight for this base down here, which is very unprotected, we'll say, relative to what we have here. But in a Stratholeth is here, we could go for Carapace Swarm on the ramp to take it with the Ultra Cores and etc. And there it is. So what's going to happen now? You can see here, it does fall pretty heavily to Consolidated Fire because it's no longer just immortal. It's, oh, here come the Zarkavra Cores, though. A lot of them have already died. Have they bought enough time? I think most of the Ultra Cores are already dead, right? So, yeah, again, Constrained Fire here. It's not going to be the best move here for Neblime. And here come the Ultra Cores, charging and taking a lot of hits while they're doing it, right? But ultimately, eventually getting focused down. There's just so many Backlists. 27 Backlists still alive. And a good Plague going down. So this is what you would really want to see, right? Is the Plague starting to spread, making it even easier for these Ultra Cores to, you know, pick off some of these units. But it doesn't last for as long. It's more of like an AoE field, right? He has a lot of his Stratholeths, actually. He could do a lot of damage here. He's trying to stack up as many of these force fields as he can to keep his units alive. But melee units will still go through it, right? So you do have to be careful about that. And there's really nothing else over here. You know, his base down the bottom has been eviscerated by the roving pack of Calculists and Zarkavra Cores. And even despite the Plague, you know, we're still seeing quite a bit. Oh, dear. He's plaguing his own units now. He just needs anything that will deal damage to air units to start, you know, continuing the battle, so to speak. But is it going to be enough? His Stratholeths are getting focused down and killed. The Zarkavra Cores are continuing their fight. Oh, okay, back at home, though. Somehow this force was able to be cleaned up. And yeah, okay, you lost some workers, and I think you lost the Excisant over here. But he stabilized, and he has some more units over here in the high ground. So, I mean, as much as, you know, Shambler's ground army is fearsome, his air army seems to have been reposted, despite being a higher tier. Now, I say that, but the Zarkavra Cores are coming. And the Stratholeth was not long for that world. Not long for Otherworld. You can see Skithra cores were made for the purpose of being turned into Vithrils, but there's just not that much money left in the coffers here. And now he also has to contend with all of the Bactylisks. It's going to be pretty rough there. So, here come the Bactyls. What do you have? You don't have any Gezzies, you don't have any Tozgralisks or anything, really. No Sovrolets, nothing. So I feel like Neblime is insulated against anti-air. Like, he's got a lot of anti-air, but he's not really insulated versus the ground army, right? Like, what can he realistically do? I guess he can try to roll in here and try to, you know, draw back some units, but there's still Zarkava cores back at home. Shambler's still floating a lot of minerals and gas. What's he even going to be going for now? Yeah, I think, unfortunately for Neblime, this is probably the closest he's gotten to, or the longest ZVZ he's been a part of, right? So he has no real immediate idea of, like, what all is happening here. Now, hey, look, there's Lakizilisks. But, of course, the Bactylisks are just going to shoot through them as soon as they're revealed. Some swarming on them would have been maybe nice, but, again, it does fall when it absorbs damage, right? So, eventually there's enough damage to... Actually, like, because there's not really immediate focus, these Carapace swarms are staying alive a lot more than you might think. Here come the Zarkava cores to eat all of those. The Vithrilists could be tasked on them, but they are not yet. The frontline focus being where Neblime is at. Oh boy. The Zarkava cores are now coming in for another hit, but here come the Vithrils and the Skiths. So surely we should be able to see something work out pretty well here, but I think all the Skiths immediately died. So now it's all down to the Vithrils. What can they do in this area? We do have a single Spraith helping. Yeah, the Armor Rend ends up allowing them to get absolutely shredded, and still trying to hold with just the Astratholeth Carapace Swarm forever and ever is Neblime. And he's actually thinned the herd quite well. I don't actually think Shambler can close here, paradoxically, surprisingly. And again, this Izira core attack, if it had coincided with that, would have walked in here and ripped shit open. So that's another opportunity that Neblime missed, I think, to equalize here. So okay, he's actually out of the woodwork, at least. Like, he's not completely dead, right? That's the important part. He's going to go back to his macro, rebuild his base in the high ground. The Zarkava cores are still running around, and his Vithrilisk army is still looking okay. You know, you combine the Armor Rend with the Bactyls, it's going to be brutal for any Zarkava cores due to the bounces. But they are coming back over here, and there were no additional attempts at building more, you know, anti-air defenses, right? He didn't reestablish that. So, okay, the Zarkava cores will get aggroed onto the Droleths. That'll be a very minor amount of early warning, but he's actually too busy trying to deal with the threat over here, right? So here comes some Vithrils to attempt at dealing with the Zarks. I don't know that it's going to be too effective, but yeah, okay, you can see here there's no armor there, so the Bactyls are able to much easier, you know, rend them. Meanwhile, some ground units over here. These start turning into Ultra Cores right on the front door. Yeah, this is some pretty mental stuff here, like the more lower end of things, right? 6 Zarkava cores, mostly untouched. They're still alive and kicking and, you know, absolutely ruining the time for Neblime. He's really trying to chase down that Astratholeth, and he will not get it. 5 HP, it lives. But is it going to be enough, right? There's really not anything else that can be done here. He's trying to keep his eggs alive, but it's just not enough. He only had the one Astratholeth. So, yeah, in this particular spot, he's in a rough spawn. I thought maybe he would be okay if he could keep this base alive. It wasn't quite possible, right? So... What's he want to do? He saw that movement on the minimap, but I think he doesn't suspect what it really is. It's just a bunch of workers. He might think it's something else. Oh, here's some more. Get him. Fuck him up. Oh, they burrow immediately. Well, he could try to respond to that with this force that's over here in the low ground, but is he going to? 20 Bactyls. And most of Shambler's units are no longer... possible to, like, regress, right? So it's a little bit easier to just completely pick them off. The Izira cores did come in here at some point during all of the action. And yeah, two of these Zarkava cores are going to get split up and killed. Although, again, it's so hard for these units to do it. They just don't have the armor pen, right? And now they're all on top of everything, so when they attack, it just spreads the damage around and does a lot of damage, as you can see. But the Kafralosks are giving Shambler a more immediate army. They just aren't giving him the army with, like, staying power, right? So that's worth noting, right? Definitely something that we need to do on the art department is eventually remodel all of the units that are high tier and then replace them with, like, visually there has to be like a recolor almost for that sort of thing. So there's an Astratholeth coming, which is kind of interesting. Vithrilisks are here along with, you know, Speartiths. So this combination should shut down small numbers of Zarkaver cores, and as luck would have it, they're even going to go ahead and fly over the army. But unfortunately here, this is not looking too hot, right? There's a pretty good plague there, as well as some Vithrilisks. Unfortunately, yeah, units that die with plague spread plague on death. So Zarkaver cores are, as they're popping, are actually dealing a little bit more damage. He's not attacking into this, so the debuff for the Vithrilusk actually expires there, but there's some more on the way. And yeah, this base is once again getting tickled to death. The Vithrilusks thought about going down there, but without the help of the Speartiths, and maybe even the Astraetholeth, they'll not be in the best of spots. We see some Kagro bugs here. We love Kagro bugs in the No Frauds Club. I have no idea. Don't even ask me. Couldn't tell you. Meanwhile, what is neblime doing? What is the Shambler doing? What are they doing at this point in time? Shambler's been, contained, so to speak, but he does have this base up, and he is harvesting from this live base. And meanwhile, all of the bases that neblime is getting from mineral depleted. This one is still good. This one is also still good, but, unfortunately, one of the Speartiths has already fallen. And, well, there's some more skits that just hatched. So, yeah, this base will stay alive, but there's almost no workers over here anyway, right? So it wasn't the highest priority, and now more Zarks are all the way already on their way anyway. Skits did just dive in there and get absolutely murdered. Carapace swarms are being cast, giving a chance to the ground army here for neblime, but not versus this many. There's just so damn many. 31 Bactylisks and no anti-air. No other tech has really been acquired, right? He hasn't tried to go for Gezzies or Cascathalors or anything like that, which really would have helped him out versus the Bactyls in particular. And the Zarkaver cores, I mean, the Vithrilusk idea is nice, but you need something else that will welcome the ability to deal full damage to them. Bactylisks are obviously one of them, maybe Mutas, Sovroleths even, something like that. Maybe Calculisks, who knows? Something that would, synergize with the Vithrilusk and help break down the Zarkaver core in that sense. I wonder if even something like an Izira core wouldn't be a bad idea, considering they have the bounce attack. Maybe something with flat AoE, like the Sikralisk comes to mind, since it deals like AoE, but it's short range and kind of not very durable, so I'm not sure about that. The Droleths are providing very vital vision of the Zarkaver cores. Oh, absolutely slapped. A roving band of Vithrilisks trying to hunt them down. They don't move nearly as fast. And I will say, I'll leave it some time at the end of this episode, the end of this cast over, to discuss balance, because I do have some considerations after watching this. But mostly just thinking about this as a match commentary right now. What is actually possible, right? neblime just keeps getting slapped around because every time he tries to expand outward of his area, he's punished for it, right? And there's just so many Zarkaver cores now that I'm not so sure that his army has been kitted to stop it, right? The Vithrilisks are on their way, but they're going to be very slow. And, yeah, well, there's 5 Zarks here, so they will end up getting melted by the Bactylisks once these Vithrilisks come in. But you can see here just how potentially viable Zarkaver cores are when you have them in this... versus a composition such as this, right? And when the Vithrilisks are not in position. So what he would really need to do here is station Vithril Bactyl Speartith at every base to guard against that. And that would be one way that he could do that. And then in order to push in over here, he would need to accompany his force with some Vithrils and maybe some Bactylisks of his own, but also have, Cascathalors, right? And now Shambler has Ultra Cores, so it's going to be a little bit harder for him to fail in the ground army department since he has some durable, sustain. He's getting a Muthrock Spire, so I don't know if he wants to add Protathalors or something else. Maybe he's going to, upgrade that into a Vithrath Haunt for Sovroleths. But neblime is on a very precarious position right now. He's got loads of gas, but he doesn't have the ability to get a Sovroleth himself. So he can't really spend it. He can't dump all of his gas onto one thing in particular. Could get more Astraetholeths, I suppose, but that's about it. And yeah, the Ultra Cores are over here. Some of them actually did end up getting focused down and choked up by the ramp. But there's no Astraetholeth to help hold the ramp. So here come some of them. Okay, we might see a little bit of a difference here. You really want to try to do a Juicy Plague on that area or something. Meanwhile, the Vithrilisks are going to get surrounded. The main base is going to get absolutely torn asunder. And even though there's Plague on all that, This is just a regular Spraith, not a Spear Tith, and I think the sheer number of Zarks was too much for the smaller number by comparison of Vithrals. So despite all the Carapace Swarms trying to keep the Ultra Cores alive, it's just not going to be enough. I think this is where he's actually been broken. He's losing his low ground natural as well to the other attack on the bottom right, and Neblime just doesn't have much back at home. Right, he never really explored the other parts of the tech tree. Despite trying to get more Bactyls, is it really going to help you here? I would say probably not. The GG is called, and the Shambler will take the 40-minute ZVZ on Otherworld. So yeah, I mean, what can you really say about that game? So what immediately comes to mind? I will say there's certainly places where both players could have played better, but it was really cool to see them, explore the tech tree a little bit and do different things. And I will say as well, Zarkavicors probably are move a little bit too fast right now, or are a little bit too durable for what they are, particularly since I think they basically have their old unit stats before Zerg unit regression was introduced. So I'm not really factoring in the idea that you get back the Gorgacore if you mutate them that way, right? So in that sense, it would add another idea, oh, I shouldn't just get these from Kefalosks because they're not as durable, they're not as everlasting, basically, if I get them that way. It's I should only do that if that meets my use case, right? Basically, the unit shouldn't be such an overwhelming upgrade over its predecessor that it's always the right choice to skip the initial point, right? That's sort of what I'm thinking. So we'll see about that. I'm not really sure if it's quite feasible to make that happen. But in the same way that I think the Bactylisk choice is a lot more sensible, where Bactylisks themselves are reduced in terms of mobility, and they're much fatter as well, so they take up more collision size. But then on top of it all, you have to worry about them getting closed in upon, and then that reducing their DPS because their bounce number goes down. So anyway, I think that's significant because it's an interesting idea to contend with. But ultimately right now we're seeing, very different ideas for how these units are actually going to be used, and many players are finding success just spamming Kefalosks and skipping the middleman, right? And that should be a tactic, but I don't know if it should be universally the good thing. And I don't actually know if it is universally the good thing, right? We have to factor in that ZVZ is still kind of uncharted territory for a lot of people. But beyond that, I will say Estratholeths, the conceptual idea for them back when we were still going to be able to get tier 4 and tier 5 in CMBW before we found out about the ice script limit, basically, was that they wouldn't have Plague and they would just be about Carapace Swarm. And then their evolution would have Plague, and Plague would be more unshackled because it would be the only thing that the unit does. But what I'm finding out about stuff in general, like the Azazel defensive matrix as a quintessential example of this, is when you essentially can spam a button push on cooldown, which is the energy regen, it's not very interesting. You're not really making an interesting decision as a player. So even if your target selection is tested, it could be more interesting and it could be more skill dependent instead of it just being, oh, the ability is ready, so I should push it. It's more like maybe the unit's positioning handles that, or that's what is compelling about Terran deployments for me, is I deploy the unit, I'm giving up some movement capacity, but I'm getting something else for it. And that's the trade-off there. So basically it being a trade-off. Now, for conventional spellcasters, or specialist units, as they're called for CMBW, but spellcasters in StarCraft, that's the internal name for them, I would say that most of the time it was a choice between the abilities. And also, let's be honest, most people just use one or two abilities, right? Very few people would ever use Hallucinate on the High Templar. Very few people would ever use Parasite or Ensnare on the Queen. They mostly got it for Broodling in ZVT for Mech. Yeah, okay, you would have occasionally used Parasite as once or something as a scout. It is a very niche ability, and I think the same is probably true for Ensnare. Although I'm sure, I remember reading somewhere that somebody had this idea in their head. They were like, yo, you could ensnare the worker line and make it so that they are less efficient at harvesting. It's yeah, bro, let me call me back when you can actually do that in a real game, and do that while also focusing on all the other things you're supposed to do and not have your queens sniped. It doesn't really make so much sense. But a lot of spells were point and click there. So generally, I think the point-and-click spells are less interesting. I think the, Plague probably is a little bit too weak in terms of its general DPS for how hard the unit is to acquire now. And Carapace Swarm is probably a little bit too easy to focus down. So I would probably want to think about how to approach redesigning the ability such that it wasn't, it didn't have an internal health pool, but there was still some other way of dealing Like, maybe we can keep the health pool, but like buff allied units in it or something. And that could be like an interesting idea for, okay, you can, choose to use your fire elsewhere as the player fighting against it. You can use your fire on units that are not under the Carapace Swarm. Or you could try to break down the Carapace Swarm so they don't have the buff, basically. Like, the Astratholeth creates this, like, buff aura, basically. But I'm not sure. I'll have to think about it for sure. That's one area where I think the Astratholeth in particular is, like, this weird mix of, like, cast abilities on cooldown, but also your abilities are kind of weak anyway. So, I don't know. Like, maybe in ZVZ specifically, the Plague ability is a little bit hard to use because you're almost always going to be, like, fighting battles with some melee unit or another. Whereas, like, in ZVT, the Plague ability might be a little bit easier to use because you won't have as many melee units for the enemy. So you might be plaguing, like, Bioballs or even, like, mech conglomerates. Or, obviously, it's, like, really good versus air because they stack, so a lot of them will get affected. So there's, like, things to consider in that way. But because the original plan for the unit was to have the abilities split between two different units, its evolution would have Plague and the default would have Carapace Swarm, that makes me feel like, oh, yeah, there's, like, some weird competition happening here where the unit might feel a little overloaded in that way. But at the same time, maybe we can provide it with a weapon or something and have that be like an interesting interaction where its weapon creates either Carapace Swarm or Plague at the target area, for certain ideas. Like maybe if it, it's a consumption ray that gives it lifesteal, and if it, when the, when the unit dies, they get, they turn into a plague field or something. I don't know. That could be kind of interesting to play around with, but then in the Astratholeth weapon range would dictate a lot about what it can do. So I have to think about that too. I'm not really sure how we'll go about that. That's just like an idea that I came up with and threw out there. So there's definitely things that I want to adjust about Zerg. And again, there's also the idea of like if their macro ends up being too dumb contextually, like if it's just too imba compared to the other races, which Mystery Meat, for example, put forth as like a hypothesis that he has. If that's the case, we're just going to have to deal with that and be like, okay, well, maybe we'll also go back to the drawing board. Like maybe we'll take Faguda's suggestion at that point and try out like establishing parity between the worker training times and stuff for all the races as one example. But beyond all that, it's just, for me, this is still a work in progress, but this is really good progress. Like this is a good little note that says, damn, like ZVZ can be something other than stupid Gorg fights, So I'm really glad to see that. And of course, the revision to the Gorg, I think, will make it more healthy. We didn't really see too much of the Nathracores in that fight, but I think that their revision will also be better. I've already heard that apparently they can even deal with Gorgs if they're microed well and stuff, and that's like my dream even before the Gorgs lose their AoE versus air. It's like, yes, perfect. Like, great, that's exactly what I want. So, yeah, interesting stuff. And I'll see you guys for the next castover, which probably won't be ZVZ, but hey, the only way you'll find out is by dropping a subscription and seeing me there. So, see you there.